once again. It's a pleasure to be back and it's a pleasure to have this conversation with you. So today I'm going to talk about the current conversation that we've been having in the dynamics, and most of these, especially among pharmacists in Kenya, the conversation has been around PharmD or B.Pharm. And that is a pertinent discussion to ask ourselves, which route are we going to and why are we going that particular route as it is being proposed, and what are the reasons behind the propositions that are coming into place. So to give context to this, I'm looking at this from previous work that I've done, background of the kind of projects that I've been engaged in terms of pharmaceutical education. And I remember not more than a month ago, I did a video in terms of how we need to transform or reimagine and transform pharmacy education, and with the role of different stakeholders on that. And I would recommend you take a look at that and see how that would work. But the main starting point for me in having this conversation is from 2016-2017 report that was rolled out by the International Pharmaceutical Federation, FIP, that was on workforce transformation, developing competencies for a global future of pharmacy practice, and seeing how that future ensures that we're able to deliver quality healthcare services, but at the same time we have the right workforce to deliver that quality services. So in that case, then the question is, how do we ensure that the people who are being trained, getting into training programs, are going to come out there competent? But on the other end is those who are in service training, in service, who are offering services. What in-service training programs are there for them to upscale and upgrade themselves to be able to perform optimally and to deliver the quality of services that are needed? But following that kind of report that came, I was in my undergraduate training program, and I did my final end of Bachelor of Pharmacy education program in terms of assessing our own local curriculum in Kenya, which when I was looking at that from my university where I schooled, it is almost the standard curriculum that we have across the country. And some of the concerns that were there for me is, how do we ensure that the training for B.Pharm undergrads is reliable and actually is enabling us to fit into the market? The translation of that knowledge from training in school to practice in the real world and in real world context and setting was critical for me. So I was asking myself, are we being trained to be able to fit into the market or not being trained to fit into that market? And those are critical concerns that we had at that point. I discussed the same conversation with some of the regulatory agencies, the pharmacy practice department especially. And these conversations were kind of feeding into what I was getting as some of the insights from even the students who were feeding into that, the lecturers who partly participated in the program as well in the research that I was doing, and international partners and friends, especially the contribution that I got from FIP consulting groups and the insight that they were sharing with me. So looking at that perspective, the key thing that we need to tell ourselves and acknowledge is that the pharmacy curriculum needs to change and it needs to be revamped. That is a common consensus that we're starting from. It needs to change. The question is, changing to what? And why does it need to change? It needs to change because it has been the same curriculum from the 1970s when pharmacy was introduced in the University of Nairobi. The practice environment at that particular moment to the practice environment that we have now and that we envision for the next 50 or 100 years is totally different. And therefore we need to, one, understand what are the current market needs and what is the futuristic aspirations of the industry, of the future of the sector or the profession, and what would be needed to make that future a reality. Then once we know what that future would look like, then we are going to equip professionals with a skill set that is going to facilitate the growth into that future of us. That is going to be a very important discussion that we look into. So those are some of the drivers that came in. Then in 2020, there was a rollout of the strategic plan by the Pharmacy and Poisons Board. And in that strategic plan, there was a common agreement that from standard global trends and global dynamics, there is an acknowledgement and a consensus that the entry level into the pharmacy career should be a bachelor's degree. It should be at degree level. And what degree program do we have in Kenya? It is the B.Pharm that has been in place. It therefore meant that any other training programs, whether it's the certificate, the diplomas, and all those paraprofessional trainings, then they need to be phased out, and we transition to have the common entry level into pharmacy curriculum as Bachelor of Pharmacy or a PharmD program as is being proposed. So it has to be a degree entry level. That is the standard consensus that has been agreed on, and that is something that is happening across the world and is now being adopted in our local context, and that is something that is being envisioned and foreseen as the next step in terms of rollout of this reviewed curriculum as the advances are moving forward. So that is a common agreement that we have to come with and align on. Then after that kind of conversation has been there, then you ask yourself, what has been the scope of our training? What are the adjustments that need to be there? And what are the futuristic approaches that need to be integrated? One, there's a focus from a product-oriented practice to patient care. And when you talk about patient care, is the pharmaceutical care that he's looking at. What is the best outcome that we would want for a patient using my product if I'm dealing with product A? This is medicine David. The medicine David should be treating a patient, and the patient should be getting relief within a particular time, and the pharmacist giving that medication should know medicine David interacts with another drug, medicine David interacts with this chemical, medicine David interacts with this particular food, and therefore these interactions are possible. Then also in the management of the patient, we should be able to review and see if this medicine is taken by this patient over a period, these would be the changes, these are the levels that are accumulating in the body. Do they have a risk of influencing their genetic makeup? Do they have an impact in terms of influencing their physiological functioning, the normal one, from what we expect to have other side effects or adverse events? Are these impacts cumulative or piecemeal and they'll disappear after we stop the using of the medication? Is this the medicine that should be used long term? So all these considerations are coming into place. So that is the kind of focus on what is the ultimate outcome of care, healthcare centric rather than product centric. And that is a key thing that we all acknowledge needs to happen, and it is happening. And that is where we started from, having just pharmacists, and we introduced the model of clinical pharmacy practice, which has been taking root as well in all our jurisdiction and all the spaces that we are in. But then, based on that understanding, the other key thing that we have to acknowledge is training should be coupled with the need and should be coupled with the emerging and current trends. And that is where I was looking at where was pharmacy 50 years ago? Where is pharmacy now? And where is pharmacy in the next 50 to 100 years? And once we see that, one of the common dynamics is we are doing our Bachelor of Pharmacy trainings as a calling, as a vocation, where we believe we are going to make a difference within the pharmaceutical sciences and pharmaceutical care domain. It is important to make that contribution. But the only thing we are going to do, the only way we are going to be able to make that contribution is when and if we get meaningful employment and meaningful engagement opportunities within those domains. Unfortunately, as it looks at the current moment, for most of us graduating in this country, we are not getting those meaningful employment opportunities or even general engagements within the clinical setting. Therefore, the extent to which the clinical training and clinical deductive experiential learning that is needed is currently not meeting what our expectation is. You are trained in school, and most of our curriculum, especially in the final 3 years of the core training curriculum, the clinical years, is more on the technical clinical pharmacy practice, patient-centered care. And you do a number of ward rounds, rotations, and clinical visits. But with that training, when you get out of school, you finish your internship, then the next phase is there's no job employment, job opportunities, and you have to scout for alternative avenues to get engaged. What are the current trends that we're looking at? With health systems strengthening intervention, universal healthcare coverage, pharmaceutical systems strengthening and all that, most of the opportunities, there's a growing focus on local manufacturing in Africa. There's a growing focus on clinical research and practices in Africa. There's a growing need for healthcare products and technologies and strong regulatory systems coming in. What does that imply for us as a local market? Most of the opportunities that are coming with emerging trends are not in the clinical setting. Most of the coming opportunities are not in the clinical setting. Doesn't mean we need to negate the clinical advances and the clinical capability building that needs to be there. We need to ensure that hospitals and clinical settings, facilities, have the requirements in terms of human workforce. They have avenues and frameworks to ensure that clinical pharmacists are practicing what they need to practice in that particular setting. That is going to be the starting point. Once we've ensured they have those, then the people who have an inclination to clinical practice will have an avenue to practice, and therefore the meaningful employment will be in place for them. However, these emerging trends and these emerging opportunities, for us to be able to ensure that we have the right workforce for them, we need pharmacists who have mastery of these pharmaceutical sciences and pharmaceutical technical skills. And that is where the training has to also meet that gap. And that is where most of the opportunities in the current domain are, whether in the pharmaceutical research and development space, clinical trial space, registration, regulatory affairs, that is, pharmacovigilance because of strong regulatory frameworks, and also with more products coming into our market, our regulatory agencies need more workforce. And when they need more workforce, they need people with the pharmaceutical science knowledge, pharmaceutical domain expertise to be able to contribute to that. If we want pharmacists to be able to play in that space and to drive that transformation, then the training has to meet that particular need. That is a clear benchmark. So then when we move from that kind of discussion, then we ask ourselves, PharmD or B.Pharm, what are the dynamics of the difference that we are having now? I took a moment to review the document that had been proposed by the Pharmacy and Poisons Board that had been reviewed by different stakeholders and all that. And this review was not on the naming. My review was on what are the technical requirements and the particular modules and courses being integrated into the curriculum. When I look at it from the B.Pharm that I did and graduated with and the current change, there's minimal disparities. And the minimal disparities would be in terms of addition of some of experiential learning, integration of ethics and ethical practices, which is also part of what we did in social business and social pharmacy, which is still in the pharmacy law. So very minute or minor adjustments that are happening into that curriculum, but though there's a kind of greater emphasis on clinical practice and greater emphasis on experiential learning. They were talking about introduction to pharmacy practice in community pharmacy, introduction to pharmacy practice in clinical pharmacy setting or hospital pharmacy, and those kind of advancement. But at the same time, that curriculum has an addition of some modules in the final year 5 of schooling, where you have regulatory affairs, I'm seeing pharmacovigilance, health supply chain, health products technologies, supply chain management, which we did in pharmacy management still, but there's these additional adjustment. Pharmacovigilance, we did it as highlights, but now there's the core course that is actually is a module by itself. So those are adjustments that are coming in. When you look at the core curriculum, the basic of it, the structure is amazing. The structure is robust enough as it needs to be. The adjustment from the B.Pharm to the current curriculum that we're having, slight changes. So then with those slight changes that I'm asking myself is, does it need to be a PharmD or does it need to be a B.Pharm? A dog with any other name is still a dog. Whichever name you give your dog, it still be a dog. So the question is, B.Pharm or PharmD, do we need to change the name? In my perspective, I don't think there's much more of a change, because the reason of that change would be people would perceive it to be more clinical. And when it's perceived to be more clinical, the question is, how do you reposition yourself to be able to practice in other domains, and especially the venue that I've discussed in this particular episode, and also the ones that I've been sharing in other spaces. So those are some of the things that we need to be cognizant of, the perception that is going to happen. The other bit is, when I look at the justification, is that we provide an avenue for upscaling for the diploma level pharmacy professionals and all that. That is the pharmaceutical technologists in Kenya. There has always been an avenue for upgrading. However, it wasn't the most efficient because it needed somebody to restart in year 1. And I studied with colleagues who had taken their pharmaceutical technology diploma level, and we went through them with the B.Pharm program. There were disparities, and especially that they had already taken some kind of some level of training. There was need for that consideration. And I believe the proposal that is here, that they do the initial 1 year, 3 year or 4 years training, so that the core training in terms of pharmacy, the clinical years, would be now compulsory and full-time for them. But at the same time, the first 2 years of the preclinical would be transferred credits, but also additional non-core where they could do it either in terms of self-guided learning, but they need to take the exams to confirm that they've passed the initial level. And I think that is a good approach to ensure that we're providing room for professional development, advancement in the career, but at the same time standardizing the entry level into the job market in pharmacy professional and pharmacy career. That would be a good move. Then in terms of the benchmark that were done, I looked at the benchmark, and the different universities, the different nations and countries that were being considered were mostly those who had adopted the PharmD program. My question is, why did we not look at other countries who actually have the same kind of environment and context with us and are still having the B.Pharm level? In the UK, they have the Bachelor of Pharmacy program, and that Bachelor of Pharmacy program is still working enough, and it's robust in terms of the content. The content isn't much different from what we are having. And therefore, the changing the name doesn't make a difference. For me, I'd rather we stay with B.Pharm, ensure that these propositions and recommendations are integrated and are modeled. And the other thing that needs to be done is, who are the people training? Are we delivering the program as it need to be delivered? Are the lecturers facilitating if we want to say we need to have more clinical and less of the non-clinical? If it has to be clinically patient-centered, then the people facilitating the program have to be patient-centric in their approach and in their delivery of the modules. If we don't change that, then it will be a change in name, a change in modules, but then it doesn't make the impact. And another interesting thing that I saw in that particular program, that some of the recommendation was that actually this came from the ministry, that we need to integrate patriotism into our training. Patriotism is good, but patriotism is like a value. We cannot treat people honesty, but we can guide them and actually socialize them into being honest people. I believe in the training that I got in terms of experiential engagement with people in the society. The socialization makes you either to be patriotic or not patriotic. And most of these values are based on what is the value proposition of it. You cannot teach patriotism, and that is something that I'm appalled at by the fact that it could be even proposed as a training that would be integrated into a curriculum. I'd rather patriotism be a principle that we talk about, but we model it by ourselves as leaders, as individuals, as a society. And in so doing, then you'll meet a pharmacy student who is in a pharm school, who is already patriotic and wants to contribute to the country. But the other thing that we need to ask about patriotism is, does that patriotism favor my interests as an individual? Does it help me grow the community and grow myself in the process? If I'm finishing Bachelor of Pharmacy education and I'm not guaranteed of a job in the current market, and there is a country that is seeking my services and opportunities, willing to give me better prospects for personal professional development and growth, most likely I'll take that opportunity. It is not that I'm not a patriotic person. It is because the circumstances within which I am operating, my personal needs and the needs of my people that I look after are inclined toward that particular prospect and opportunity. And that is the question that we need to see. When you're talking about patriotism, the focus on how do we ensure we have local workforce, local talent, local skill set that is helping us deliver on our UHC agenda, it is about making those opportunities available and making them available in a meaningful and satisfying perspective, in the sense that I am meaningfully engaged. At the end of the day, I'm assured that when I'm unwell, I'll be able to seek and access the healthcare services that I'm providing on this other end. There's no way I'll work as a pharmacist if when I fall ill, I'm not even able to get the pharmaceutical care that I have been offering to people. Most of our young doctors are suffering the same consequences. That needs to be addressed. There's no way I'll be educated as a pharmacist, and now my child cannot go to pharmacy school because the cost of that education is substantially high that I'm not able to afford it. And we all see the current conversation around KUCCPS, the help loan being scrapped off, government scholarship going to only around 45,000 people thereabout. These are dynamics. And if I'm not able to meet that, then the incentive of being patriotic and pursuing the interests of the nation would be more kind of diluted. But we have to start it from what is the principle, what is the basis. And I'm thinking from this discussion and this insight I've shared, we're able to see there's a need for review of our curriculum. There's need to provide for professional development and growth for those who started at the diploma level, for the pharmacy graduate levels, and how we move forward. I started at degree level. I believe when we have B.Pharm as it is, all we need to do when we're seeing in terms of diversifying and ensuring we have core specialties and specializations, there are provisions to recognize specialists. That is where I'll finish my B.Pharm at 5 years of schooling. I do 1 year internship. Then after that, I have an avenue that I can do a clinical pharmacy, let's say for 2 years. I can do industrial pharmacy masters for 2-3 years. In that case, I'll now becoming a specialist in that particular line. But if we drive the specialization at the core level, it will not work. Luckily enough, after reviewing the materials and all that content that is provided for, there's not much of a specialization, but rather a focusing on our content to ensure that the training is value-driven, value-based, and patient-centric in terms of delivering value in our healthcare system. And the other thing that I enjoyed is the fact that the curriculum actually has a self-systems component to it, something that hasn't been part of most of our curriculums across the country. And if part of the curriculum, it hasn't been trained on. And I'm hoping that most of these curriculums and most of these courses will be trained by the people who are practicing in these environments, who are able to share their real life experiences and able to actually shape the future. My level of actually dissatisfaction, again, the professionals didn't play a greater role in the review of the curriculum. Because when I was looking at the stakeholders who are engaged in the different review cycles, professional associations modestly got engaged. The PharmTech, the Kenya Pharmaceutical Association, was involved in the sense that most of their people, when we're looking at phasing out the diploma, they would be the most impacted. But the question is, where are we as pharmacists in reviewing that curriculum and sharing our perspectives to see how it goes? Where are we as professional, as David as a professional regulatory affairs pharmacist? Did I make my contribution? Was I able to make that contribution? If I didn't, why did I not make that contribution? There's need for more stakeholder engagement and more focused engagement in shaping the future of our career. And I'm hoping when we have this conversation in a more intentional, more robust perspective based on values, then we'll be able to shape the future of pharmacy practice and the pharmacy career for our nations and service delivery generally to the patients that we're looking out for at the end of the day. Thank you so much for engaging and watching this conversation to the end of it. If you find it insightful, please share your perspective, share your comments, subscribe to the channel, share the video with some of your colleagues. Let's have this cross-pollination of ideas and perspectives so that we have a robust healthcare system. And if we're able to do that, we'll be in a successful nation, we'll be in a successful continent, and we'll have more healthy people and more productive individuals. Thank you so much and have a great week ahead.